I'd like to call to order the MWPA Board regular meeting of September 15th, 2022. Martina, would you please do the roll call?
Certainly. Director Molesworth, Bolinas.
Present.
Director Paulson of Larkspur.
Present.
Director Burke of Mill Valley.
Present.
Director Kurtz of San Rafael.
Present.
Director Donahue of Inverness.
Present.
Director Evergettis of Kentfield.
Present.
Director Shea of Marinwood.
Here.
Director Jeschke is absent for this meeting. Director Goins of Novato.
Here.
Director Finn of Sleepy Hollow.
Here.
Director Hilliard of Southern Marin.
She's in the attendee list right now.
Oh, I apologize, Director Hilliard. We'll get you here in just a moment. And Director White of Stinson Beach.
Here.
Director Evasio of Corte Madera.
Here.
Director Kohler of Fairfax.
Here.
Director Berto of San Anselmo. Do we have Director Berto there?
Don't think so today.
He
said
he'll
be
be
a
a little late.
A little bit late. And then circling back around to Director Hilliard of Southern Marin. Director McMillan of Ross.
Here.
And President Rodoni of Marin Fire.
Present. Thank you. Thank you all for joining us today. Third item on the agenda is the adjustment for agenda items. Anyone wish to make any changes to the agenda today? All right, seeing no suggested changes, we'll move on to item 4, which is open time for public expression. The public is welcome to address the Board of Directors at this time on matters not on the agenda that are within the jurisdiction of the board. Please be advised that pursuant to the Government Code section, the board will not be permitted to discuss or take action on any matter not on the agenda. Comments can be no longer than 3 minutes and should be respectful to the community. Please remember to silence your phones and mute your microphones when not reporting out. Martina, do we have any public comments today?
If there are any members of the public wishing to speak on matters currently not on the agenda, please raise your hand in the reactions. If you're joining us by phone, please use *9 to raise your hand and *6 to unmute yourself. And sir, I do not see any hands for public comment.
Thank you. So now we'll move on to item 5 with the Executive Officer's Report. Mark?
Good afternoon, President Rodoni, board members. Starting up my screen share, and since today lines up with the beginning of National Hispanic Heritage Month, we thought we'd recognize that. I want to thank Martina for finding this image and also the quotation at the bottom, which I really enjoy. Diversity is a fact, but inclusion is a choice we make every day. And I don't think I can add to that. As typical, we'll talk about the recent fires, the fire weather, and this last heat wave that we had just shows that our fuel conditions across the state are at a tipping point. And it just takes something to push the fuel conditions over the edge to where they can be available for extreme fire growth. Typically, in of itself, hot weather does not increase fire danger dramatically, but our fuels are so susceptible right now that heat wave that we had did spark the increased growth of numerous fires throughout the state. We had 2 in Siskiyou County, 1 in the Tahoe National Forest, and 2 large fires down in the Southland and Riverside and San Bernardino. The one of the most note is the mosquito fire in the Tahoe National Forest, and I can pretty much guarantee you what the incident management team is working on. They know that they have a very large volume of fire, and they were doing everything they can to get containment line around that fire until prior to any subsequent weather event coming, because in California, it's almost just a matter of time before a new weather event comes and pushes a fire around. And when these fires all ignited, it was deep enough into that weather pattern of the hot and dry that when I looked at the fuel moistures, they were all at historic lows. They are trending back into almost average, but they're still not back to average at this time. But many of you may realize that or know already that they are predicting some rain on Sunday, moving in and through Tuesday. It could be up to an inch or more in some of the areas. And oddly enough, this is not a storm that is bringing tropical moisture. And that could be a better thing for us than if it was bringing tropical moisture, because the tropical moisture often leads to lightning moving throughout the state of California. So the modeling looks like we're going to avoid the lightning event that comes with that moisture. And then during the fall weather patterns, whenever we have a low pressure system move through, we'll typically have an offshore event that follows it. Again, the modeling is showing that if there is going to be an offshore event, it's not going to be as strong. And the models are showing there will be enough wetness to limit any impacts of an offshore event. But I do want to emphasize this will just simply pause fire danger. It's not an end to the fire season. And then more locally, there was a small fire in Novato yesterday, just under an acre near the country club area. Rapid response from Novato Fire, and it really seems clear that there was a successful unified command between Novato Fire and Novato PD. Evacuation notifications via police officers pounding on doors versus notifications was executed. So it seemed like there was a well-coordinated attack for both the fire attack and the evacuation efforts. Moving on, as many of you know, Belle Cole was recognized with Sustainable San Rafael for all of her efforts. And in this picture that you see, Bruce Goins is delivering a gift that we all from the MWPA with some also supplemental contributions from some of our board members gave to Belle, and Bruce, being Bruce, like he always does, spoke from the heart and recognized the appreciation the MWPA has for Belle's collaboration and partnership and just the efforts that she puts forward. And her gift was carbon credits. Her family lives on the East Coast, and she always feels guilty about visiting her family and the carbon footprint that she creates by that visit. So we gave her enough carbon credits to offset 3 trips to go visit her family. And you see Representative Huffman in the back center of this picture. It still amazes me how locally involved he is and what he means to our communities. And thank you to Ann for taking this picture. I do want to introduce one of our new Grizzly Corps members. We received 2 Grizzly Corps members, but one of them already had a previous appointment that she was scheduled for her education that was overlaps with this meeting. But I would like Elena to go ahead and pop up and introduce herself to the board members, please.
I'm unmuting myself. Yeah, I'm Elena Benching, new Grizzly Corps Fellow with the MWPA. I just received my bachelor's in 2020 in biology and a minor in studio art. And I'm originally from Portland, Oregon. I'm excited to be working with the MWPA.
And we're very excited about having Elena. And then our next board meeting will make sure that we have the opportunity for Andrea to introduce herself to you. Both amazing young ladies. The Grizzly Corps program offers tremendous candidates, and we get it was a difficult decision to land on the 2 candidates we had because there were so many good candidates, but I think that speaks highly of the candidates we did choose. Many of you probably noticed since the last board meeting, we've had a tremendous amount of media attention. 5 separate articles within the Marin IJ and a quick blurb on Channel 7 ABC. I've also been in the Point Reyes Light a couple times. San Rafael's doing some great work around historic buildings that was recognized. Southern Marin Fire received a nearly $1 million appropriation from Assemblymember Levine for work along Highway 1 in the Tam Valley. That was in an article and on ABC 7. The Fire Foundry made the paper twice. And we also had some press for the Greater Ross Valley Shaded Fuel Break. And then the MMWD hosted a tour up in their watershed lands, which I'll touch a little bit on that when we get so when we get to the regional priority plan, what that is in conjunction with the regional forest and fire capacity building program. I've mentioned this a couple of times. This is a collaboration of CAL FIRE, Department of Conservation, and the Coastal Conservancy. And they are looking at creating block grants for areas that are working on forest and fire capacity building. We have been working side by side with one TAM to create a regional priority plan to receive a block grant. Part of our efforts has been to show the great partnership that we have and the work that we're actually doing in Marin. And we have had a couple different visits. MWD's visit was one, and we also hosted a visit to look at some of the work that we've been funding. And for when we had the first visit, one of the members from the Department of Conservation mentioned, you guys being in Marin are just about the only area in the state that we've seen that is successfully combining forest health and wildfire prevention. There's a lot of other areas that are saying they want to do this. You're about the only area that's been successful in doing this. So the timeline for us to get the regional priority plan submitted is near the end of this year that we'll have it submitted, and any awards of block grants we're looking at spring of next year. And we'll be, if the block grant is more focused on forest health, we're looking at one TAM being the fiduciary agent. If the block grant is more focused on the built environment, the wildland urban interface, then the MWPA would likely be the fiduciary agent, depending on any approval from the board members. Again, I mentioned Southern Marin Highway 1 evacuation route, $1 million appropriation from Assemblymember Levine. It was a project that the MWPA had already put on its core bucket list. And so we've already started environmental compliance on it. In fact, it's part of the package that you're receiving today after receiving the environmental compliance from our federal partners. And what's likely to happen, and we'll work it out, is that we'll work closely with Southern Marin Fire to be the lead for that project. And then the monies would funnel from the Southern Marin Fire into MWPA in order to pay for the work. Happy to announce that the COC recommendation task force met earlier this week so that we can absorb the recommendations that came from the COC and implement the proper changes for our procedures and or our policies. Some very innovative ideas and solutions came out of it. Also some reality checks of what is reasonable for our member agencies to do to satisfy these recommendations. And then just also wanted to let you know that tomorrow morning, I'll be sending an email to all of our member agencies asking for a fiscal snapshot in time for fiscal year 1920 for the financial resources that each member agency was putting towards wildfire prevention prior to Measure C, because one of the stipulations in the ordinance and our tax, our JPA, is that our work is amplifying the work that was already being done, not supplanting. So we want to get that snapshot in time to make sure that we are amplifying the work. Part of what was approved for this fiscal year's work plan is our knowledge and attitude survey, which we're connecting with our diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts. We have established a contract with Josh Damone, a name that you guys may recognize because he was one of the key players in creating the Fire Foundry. And we are also connecting with the Marin volunteer organizations active in disasters, Marin Center for Independent Living, the Canal Alliance, North Marin Community Services, the Multicultural Center of Marin, and the County Offices of Equity to help design this knowledge and attitude survey, make sure that we're asking the right questions of the right people and delivering that survey in the right way so we can get important data. Measure O is a measure that is in Inverness. It was a grassroots effort to create a 20 cents per square foot parcel tax for building space within the Inverness Public Utilities District. IPUD has taken no position on it, as the Inverness Association has taken no position on it. Many people have reached out to the MWPA about this issue, and we make it clear that we have no position on this as well. We're just providing factual information. And two ways that we'll be helping to deliver this factual information is a listening session or discussion session Monday of next week. And then I'll be attending the IPUD Board of Directors meeting the last week of September. Almost there. I know it's a lot. I apologize. But a lot of great stuff going on. We have discussed with the board IBHS and their wildfire prepared designation, which requires IBHS evaluators to come to our residents' home to evaluate a home that's likely already been evaluated twice by our member agencies through our DSpace program. So they actually came out and evaluated one of our residents' homes. We were present with them so that we could discuss with them, perhaps instead of using IBHS evaluators, that they would actually use the reports that we generate. And so it was a very fruitful conversation. I think we gained a lot of traction, and we are already in conversations to schedule our next meeting so that we can work out a system that they'll start accepting our reports. Wildfire misinformation. I'm sure you've seen a lot of wildfire misinformation disseminated out and about to the public. We just received a really excellent research study on the wildfire information, describes how it happens, what it causes, and how we can combat that. And so after today's meeting, I'll be forwarding this to all of you as the board members and all to our committee members, so you can have that in your arsenal of talking points for when people bring this up. You can have the real information to pass off to people. And then finally, I said a lot today, but you'll notice that our agenda is very light and there are no action items, but please do not mistake that for a lack of work. We have spent the last couple of years building processes so that we can work hard, and that's what's going on right now. I really feel like we've just shifted into a new gear. So I hope that you are all seeing the great work that's going on out there. But the important thing is to realize is that we are racing to get this done before a devastating fire occurs. And there's no guarantee we're going to get all our work done before that type of fire occurs. And with that, I'll stop my screen share and take any questions.
Thank you, Mark. I'm going to open it up to the board for questions of Mark. Yeah, I think Barbara, you go first, please.
Yes, Mark, just a quick question. What is the other Grizzly Corps person's name? Andrea what?
Salinas.
Selena. Okay, thank you, and great work.
Thank you.
Julie?
Thank you. Mark,
Julie, you went mute.
I'm sorry. I'm just wondering, Mark, on the regional priority plan, what is the magnitude of the grant that is possible?
We haven't heard any official number, but rumors are large. I'll just leave it right now that rumors are large, between the 5 and 10 million range.
Oh, that's awesome. Okay,
Over a
great.
5-year period.
Okay, thank you.
Catherine?
I have two questions. One is, what is IBHS? Sorry, I'm so dumb.
The Insurance Institute for Business and Home Safety.
Okay, and they
make recommendations that all the insurance companies follow.
oh, great. Okay. And the other thing is, can you give us an update on our new headquarters? What's going on? When can we get into it? When do we get a tour? And
You
anything
bet.
you can tell us about that.
We have been working in there for a little over a month now, and I feel like we've already increased our efficiency in our work. It's allowed an environment where we can have spontaneous conversations a little bit easier than we did at Southern Rim Fire. But also, I think more importantly, it's made it easier for us to meet with our member agencies and also meet with different members of the public. As far as tours, whatnot, you're going to hear something from Director McMillan later on, inviting you all to meet with her at the facility. And then an idea that Director Kurtz has is that we target our December meeting as a hybrid meeting and follow that up with a open house. So that's the timeline.
Bruce?
Yeah, just real quick. Mark, the field tour that was attended to by the Coastal Commission and the resource agency staff and executives, I just want to say I participated in that, and it was an astounding day with very important and interested people. And Mark, I think the board should know that Bill Keene, who has provided support to us, he was instrumental in first of all conceiving this as an idea and an opportunity to engage and inform. And Mark, I think our board expressed our thanks to Bill for the work that he did. And there were some statements that came back afterwards from the Deputy Director of the Department of Conservation that Mark he summarized there. But in essence, we should all take a moment and pat ourselves on the back, and to all of our staff, not us board members, because we're not the boots on the ground, but the people that are putting these projects together and doing the work and moving the material and it being exposed to poison oak and yellow jackets and heat and whatever. But I think we should pat ourselves on the back. But I do think that we should all thank our respective fire staff who are planning and implementing this work. It opened a lot of eyes. And the one thing that Mark didn't mention that we're doing that other areas aren't doing is greenhouse gas assessment of implications of our work, and to go forward and to make some informed decisions regarding disposal and processing and potential end product. So we opened a lot of eyes. But Mark, thanks Bill, and everybody thank your team, because they're doing this great work. So thank you.
Yeah, Bill has an incredible network within the state agencies, and he's been leveraging that network to help support our cause. I'll pass along the thanks to him for sure.
Yeah. Terrific. Thanks, Mark. Any other questions for Mark from board members? Martina, can we check the public for public comment on the executive officer's report?
Certainly, sir. If there are any members of the public wishing to speak on the executive officer's report, please raise your hand in the reactions. If you are joining us by phone, you may use *9 to raise your hand and *6 to unmute yourself to speak. And sir, we do not have any public comments. You are muted, sir.
Bring you back to the board for any further discussion. There's no action required. All right, let's move on to the item 6, the consent calendar. Opportunity for public comment on the consent calendar items will occur prior to the board's discussion of the consent calendar. The board may approve the entire consent calendar with one action, or any alternative items on the consent calendar may be removed by any board member or staff member for separate discussion and vote. I'll now take public comment on the consent calendar.
If there are any members of the public wishing to speak on the consent calendar section of the agenda, please raise your hand in the reactions. If you're joining us by phone, please press *9 to raise your hand and *6 to unmute yourself. And so we do not have any hands for public comment.
Thank you, Martina. I'll come back to the board. Does anyone want to wish to pull an item from the consent calendar? Bruce, you have your hand up?
Hi, yeah, thanks. Just very quickly, I don't want to pull an item, but on page 27 of the packet, there is an error in that report under treatment prescription by cover type, and I think there's supposed to be a link to an image or a map, and it says error reference source not found. And so if we can have that corrected, please, for the record. But I don't wish to discuss it any further. So thank you.
Okay, Rachel?
When the time is right, I'm happy to approve the minutes, and I did not attend the August 18th meeting, but I did watch the video. So
Thank you.
that's all.
Any other comments regarding the consent calendar? Okay, looks like we'll do it all with one motion then. Could I have a motion to approve the consent calendar with the corrections noted?
I would make that motion. This is Barbara Kohler with the corrections notice. So all items on consent.
Thank you.
I'll second.
I'm sorry, I didn't catch that second. Rachel, thank you. So
Thank you.
moved by Kohler, second by Kurtz to approve the consent calendar in its entirety. Can we do a roll call, please?
Certainly, Director Molesworth,
Aye.
Director Paulson,
Aye.
Director Burke,
Aye.
Director Kurtz,
Aye.
Director Donahue,
Aye.
Director Evergettis,
Aye.
Director Shea,
Aye.
Director Jeschke is absent, Director Goins,
Aye.
Director Finn,
Aye.
Director Hilliard,
Aye.
Director White, Director White,
Aye.
Director Rabasio,
Aye.
Director Kohler,
Aye.
Director Bordeaux. And I know we were expecting him later. Director McMillan,
Aye.
President Rodoni.
Aye.
And then I'd just like to remind everyone, if possible, if you're not speaking, to please go ahead and mute yourself so that we don't get that echo and feedback.
Thank you, Martina. Assume that passes. So we'll move on to 7A, which is October 2022 finance report from the treasurer. Alicia?
She should be moving over just a moment, sir.
Thank you.
Welcome, Elisa. You are muted.
Somebody had to do it. Thank you. We are working quickly and closely with agencies to finish up last fiscal year's core projects and get that straightened out. But last fiscal year is finalized in terms of the budget. And we are now 17% through fiscal year 23. Last fiscal year finished at 78%, which I was surprised by given how kind of slow we were by the last report, but things are picking up. And with that, I'll take any questions.
Thank you. Any questions of the treasurer, please? Okay, seeing none. Can we move to the public for public comment about this item?
If there are any members of the public currently wishing to speak on the current item of the agenda, please raise your hand in the reactions. If you are joining us by phone, please press *9 to raise your hand and *6 to unmute yourself. And sir, we do not have any hands for public comment.
Thank you, and I'll bring it back to the board for further discussion. Seeing none, thank you, Alicia. And we'll move to 7B, which is the 22-23 work plan update. Anne?
Thank you. I'll just share my screen. Are you able to see this slide?
Yep.
Great. Well, we have a lot going on as usual. We have a few projects that were kind of on hold from the 21-22 work plan. And that, as you know, was because we were working with federal partners on compliance under the National Environmental Policy Act, or NEPA. And that took place. And so that's very exciting. We have 2 core projects and 1 local project that can then move on. That process of kind of creating a way to coordinate in terms of projects every year, that was a great feat of collaboration between us and Golden Gate National Recreation Area staff. So we really appreciate that coordination. Federal staff didn't really have a way of incorporating MWPA projects into their annual work plans and their annual environmental compliance yet. So that has been worked out. And so now our future collaboration will be easier. In addition, as you know, we have 1 project that needed additional environmental compliance in terms of Coastal Act compliance. So last time we spoke in August, we had just completed a hearing with county planning staff, and that went well. And now we are near completion. We're just waiting for the state to weigh in. And then we have one project on this agenda from the 22-23 work plan, and that is work in Marin City. So all three projects this time around are in the southern zone. Now, our grant program is well underway and very successful. And I'd love to point out one that, we have well over 300 grant applications from residents to do home hardening in defensible space in progress or awarded. And that is a huge increase over last year. And so we're really on track to exceed all of last year's activity sometime this fall. I'd also like to point out Maria Schmidt, who's our new grant specialist and a Grizzly Corps fellow from last year. She's been doing an amazing job. So I'd love to read an email that we got from a resident very quickly. This resident said, a while ago, I had a fire prevention inspection, and one of the suggestions I received was to change our siding. After my husband and I made our decision to start the project, I called and got connected to a lady named Maria. What a pleasure she was. She completely answered all of my questions one by one and truly helped me to go through this process. She explained to me how to apply for the grant related to this project and how to find various documents for it. I felt like I have someone who has the knowledge and information completely, and I trusted her fully. I'm so glad and lucky to have her helping me all this time, and I would like to thank you for having and or training such a valuable person in your office. So again, just want to say great job, Maria, and thank you for all your dedication and hard work to make sure that resident grant program is successful. So last month, you might remember that we gave some kudos to Stephen Peters because the Chipper program is receiving a lot of kudos as well. That program is still very active and busy. As of early September, we've had over 1,676 pickups completed, and that's over 5,500 cubic yards of material. So where are we now in terms of the statistics? We have over 287 miles of roadside evacuation route work completed in terms of environmental compliance, so ready to implement or soon to be if you're in the coastal zone. We also have a lot of acreage now in terms of shaded fuel break projects ready to implement, prescribed herbivory, etc. This number here includes the September projects from today's agenda, and it also includes acreage for the Greater Ross Valley Shaded Fuel Break WUI areas, so the additional polygons that are part of the project in addition to the linear portion of the project. So I added those in, and that's partly because that's in response to neighbors along the way who were asking us to do a little extra in areas that they're really concerned about, but that are covered under our environmental compliance. And then we have 12 miles of fire roads projects ready to implement, but we also, I'd love to note that Novato is looking at fire roads and studying fire roads, inventorying fire roads, and that may end up being a pilot project for other zones as well. So that's it for me. Happy to take questions.
Questions of Ann? Looks like Bruce got your hand up.
Hi, Ann, great report, amazing work. So there are a couple of items here. One is in the evacuation route project on the coastal zone. I'm interested in what the time frame is for the state, and that I'm assuming it can be the Coastal Commission to weigh in, and what specific action is required on their part in order for us to proceed. And if they weigh in, if they don't weigh in positively, what are the implications for the project design and for it to proceed?
Yeah, great question. The project area that we defined as part of our permit application to the county is also within the appealable area for the state.
Okay.
So state staff can decide to appeal the county's decision to grant us the permit. So we're waiting for them to weigh in on that. Their deadline is the 21st of this month. And so we'll find out. What may happen is they ask for kind of additional measures to be incorporated in the project or something like that. We're not sure yet. So we'll just see, when we hear from state staff, what else they would like to see from us. One thing to note is that we will be kicking off a process to create a programmatic permit called a PWP or Public Works Plan to cover activities in the coastal zone. So we're reaching out to Marin RCD and other potential partners, our coastal agencies or member agencies, to think through what kind of activities we would like to include in that plan. In theory, that should provide some streamlining in the future because it's kind of direct negotiation with state staff to cover these activities. And a lot of the measures that get incorporated into this plan and future projects are really based on the Cal BTP and the measures that are drafted for that and then kind of modified for the coastal zones. So we're already familiar with the Cal BTP. A couple of RCDs have undertaken this effort, and we're going to use their templates and their knowledge to help build a process of our own.
Okay, so then to be clear, then September 21st, we'll hear from the state, and they could, as you say, they could appeal. And I guess I don't know what that would constantly mean. And none of us do, I guess. Or they could maybe suggest just mitigation measures, changing project design. We really don't know. But this, I think that, it's critical that we understand this is a big deal. And it's costly and time consuming. And it sounds like you have a process to move forward, looking towards a programmatic approval process for. So that's great. The other just question. The other question comment is that, and I made this comment in the executive committee, is that in your reporting out to us on what we're getting accomplished, we're real good at reporting, the outputs, the acres and the miles. But I think we're missing the point, which I think we're supposed to be reporting the outcomes in how we're transforming the landscape, taking, extreme high, very high landscape to high, medium or low. And so I would really like to ask you, and this isn't a question, it's a comment, to please start thinking about the metrics that we have in our strategic plan and to be reporting to the board as far as the outcomes that we're achieving and in addition to the outputs.
Yeah, I'd love to respond to that. We'll be working to develop those metrics. We have objectives, and the next step is really to develop those metrics and how do we quantify the work that we're doing in terms of, high, medium, and low risk. That's going to take a bit of a process. In addition, we're going to be building our kind of GIS capacity, which will be needed to really quantify that because we don't have that capacity at the moment. But we're moving in that direction. We're actively talking about all of that right now. And so stay tuned is what I'd say.
And also to add on to that, we are also about to release our beta analysis of actual getting measurements of the decrease in structural ignitability and decrease in ignitability within our defensible space, and also the results of fire behavior, fire line intensities, rates of spread based on our work. So we're right on the precipice of sharing all of that. We're just waiting for the finalization of the peer review of that project.
Great work. Thank you.
Catherine. You're muted, Catherine Donahue. There you go.
I want to thank Bruce for bringing that to our attention because I think it's so important to have timelines and everything. And when I first joined this board, it was all about communication, and that was my main thought about communication. And I think that in West Marin particularly, we're feeling kind of frustrated out here, not to get too much into West Marin, but Measure O is one of those things that happens when we don't get communication. And I think Mr. Rodoni said, you know, information on the Point Reyes Light and all that we're doing is so important for our constituents. So that's how I'm feeling right now.
Thank you, Catherine. So I want to welcome Steve Burdo, who's joined the meeting. Director Burdo is here now. Martina? Any other questions at this point on the work plan? Let's move to the public, please. Oh, there's a question, Julie. Go ahead and yeah.
Sorry, Anne, I was just wondering if the consultant is involved in helping you develop the metrics, the additional outcome metrics.
Yeah, that's a great question. You know, we worked with Charlotte Jourdain on the objectives development and expect to likely work with her again for metrics development, but we'll be incorporating and consulting with Panorama along the way to make sure that all of our parties are involved.
Great.
Thanks for that
Thank
question.
you. Perfect.
Any other comments? Before we go to the public, Bruce, I just wanted to comment. My experience with the Coastal Commission is you won't hear anything. They may make suggestions of conditions or mitigations be added, or the thing we don't want, they may appeal it to the Coastal Commission itself. So anywhere in between. So it's three things we're waiting to see. And they're often very late. So till 11:59 on that night, you can't count on they won't respond. So, very good. So I'll move to the public now. Martina, please.
If there are any members of the public wishing to speak on the agenda's current item, please raise your hand in the reactions. And if you're joining us by phone, please press *9 to raise your hand and then *6 to unmute yourself. And sir, we do not have any hands for public comment at this time.
Thank you. We'll bring it back to the board for any further discussion. No action is required on this item. Okay, going to move to 7C, the Executive Officer Goals, Objectives, and Compensation, and invite Jean Bonender in to present this on behalf of the Executive Committee and Board.
And welcome, Jean.
Good afternoon, everyone. Nice to see you again. I have an informational report for you this afternoon from the Executive Committee. And in particular, I'd like to express my appreciation for the work that the Executive Committee has done. That is Dennis Rodoni, your chair, Bruce Goins, your chair emeritus, Julie McMillan and Rachel Kurtz, and a relatively new addition of Catherine Hilliard. And thanks to Barbara Kohler, who serves as the alternate on this. And finally, of course, we couldn't get much executive committee work done, especially in closed session, without Megan Acevedo. So thanks to you all. And Mark has been instrumental throughout this too, although in kind of a not direct position, and I'll describe that in just a bit. So the Executive Committee has been following up on Mark's evaluation from last year. You might recall that when his evaluation was completed in late April, that there were a couple of conditions that were included in the resolution that adopted his revised contract. And one was that the Executive Committee would work on an executive compensation plan and policy within the next 6 months. And that 6 months is, although it's not a firm and fast deadline, the goal was to reach it by September 30th. And we are very, very close. So The executive committee has been working on this for the past several months, and the second portion was that the board of directors agreed to support Mark's continuing professional development. And in that effort, Mark is working currently with the Dominican University's Executive Leadership Program, and one of their faculty members is his advisor. We're going forward on broader development of strategy planning and long-term issues related to running an organization like MWPA. In addition, he's developed a mentoring relationship with an experienced retired city manager, and both of those efforts are ongoing. So the intent of this the status report is to give you a preview of what's coming to the full board at your next meeting in October, which is to look at the policy and plan and to provide a fuller understanding of what the plan encompasses and the elements that the executive committee has been looking at. The executive committee looked very broadly in this topic area. They looked at comparisons with other agencies, although recognizing that MWPA is a unique entity. There aren't any direct comparisons out there, but it is interesting to scan the horizon and see what other leadership positions in the North Bay area are have developed in terms of compensation planning. We also worked on the frequency of the reviews and which other agencies should be among those comparators that you look at, although they're not direct comparisons. In addition, we've been working on goals and objectives for Mark going through the fiscal year 2024. And we're looking to revise his job description. The executive committee recognized that they're probably going to have to do that. You are probably going to have to do that about every 3 years, because this position and this agency is evolving very quickly. And the initial tasks and responsibilities that were designed for the person filling the executive officer position are now in more of a mature leadership organization, and the job description needs to reflect that. There are recommendations on annual evaluations and periodic adjustments, and so the details of that will be coming to you in October of 2024, but we wanted to give you just a snapshot of the depth and breadth of the work that the executive committee has been doing to achieve a really well-designed and comprehensive executive compensation plan and policy. So what we will be asking you to do in October is likely looking at 2 levels of resolution. One is to adopt the plan and policy. And of course, it will be an action item and subject to discussion and direction from the board as to whether or not you want to do that. And then the next part of it is the evaluation process itself. In December of 2021, the board authorized the executive committee to manage this process on the entire board's behalf, and that's Mark's evaluation and then the comp and policy. And so Barbara Kohler had a comment earlier this week, and Megan and I took a look at the past history and I think provided her with an acceptable answer. But it did bring to the point that we need to clarify that the executive committee has actually been authorized by the board of directors to conduct the evaluation on an annual basis. It was done so for Mark's first evaluation, and this process is a continuation of that first evaluation. But going forward, one of the things mature organizations do is codify their practices, and this is one of those practices that that we think needs a formal declaration. So it's and just as a point of information, you know, some entities have the entire board of directors conduct the evaluation process. Some have delegated it to the executive committee, and that decision is entirely up to you. So that's just one of the other things that's coming. And the last thing is just a reminder that remarkably enough, it's time again to start another year's evaluation process. And hopefully our intent is to bring this plan and policy to you in October. So around or about the first part of November, when Mark's full second year starts with the MWPA, that we will have all the protocols in place to go forward with evaluating him for his second year's performance. So, and then at that point, you will also need to authorize whether or not the executive committee is going to do it, the full board is going to do it, and if you would like me or someone like me to facilitate the evaluation process. So that's the story, and we wanted to give you the opportunity to hear this range of information, and any questions that you might have or any things that you would like us to highlight in particular as we bring the full report forward to you in October, we'd be happy to do so and happy to hear any comments and thoughts that you might have. So with that, I'm done. And once again, my appreciation to the executive committee, and they may have some comments as well that they would like to add to mine.
Thank you, Jean. Want to personally thank you for the work that you put into this. We couldn't have done this without you, and it was a very collaborative effort between the executive committee and yourself. And I think we did a heavy lift, because it's kind of the first time we put this policy together and the first time we thought about it. And I'm personally pretty pleased at what we've done. So still a little finishing to do before we bring it to the board, but thank you again for the work. And we'll go to other committee members or board member questions at this point for Jean or even Megan, if you have any questions on the legal side. Any of the other executive committee members want to make comment? Okay.
Good job, Jean. Jean, you're heavy lifting the background. Dennis, your comments, I'll just underscore that there was a lot of research that went into this, a lot of discussion, a lot of facilitation, and some principles that we had to walk and talk through, and we did it in an open-minded fashion and honest, and we've landed with I think it's just a really fantastic package, and lays a lot of responsibility on our executive officer to articulate the game plan forward, and us to keep our eyes on just moving forward positively. So Jean, amazing, and the executive committee too. Thanks, Dennis, for your comments.
Yeah, thanks, Bruce. Anyone else want to make a comment at this point, ask a question? If not, we'll go to the public, Martina, for any public comment.
If there are any members of the public wishing to comment on this item of the agenda, please raise your hand in the reactions. If you're joining us by phone, please press *9 to raise your hand and *6 to unmute yourself. And sir, we do not have anyone for public comment.
Thank you. So bringing it back to the board for any further discussion, there's no action on this item. All right, seeing none, we'll move to item 8, which is committee reports, Fire Safe Marin report. And we have Rich here. Hi, Rich.
Hello, everybody. Thank you. As usual, the report is fairly self-explanatory. I'd be glad to answer any questions about it. You might be interested, I could show you a couple of very short previews of what some of the new ADAPT campaign videos look like. It's a little bit of a different spin on things. Might be a more interesting use of time, only take about 2 minutes if you want me to go through that.
That sounds good.
Great. So let me go ahead and share screen here. And just remember that unfortunately on Zoom, things suffer just a little bit. Just so you know, we made a point that the emphasis this year tends to be on shorter videos because so much of it is going on social media and other places, and we're trying to deal with it, people's attention span. So I'll give you an example of you start with a 30-second video and then you edit it down to 15 and then you edit it down to 6 and you use it in different areas depending on what the opportunities are provided in that medium. And of course, they're in Spanish and English, so I'll mix around a little bit. So I'll start with a longer one in English, 30 seconds.
When it's time to evacuate, you know what to do? Fast moving wildfire. Confirming your evacuation order from E021.
It's changed to an evacuation order. Let's go.
Be prepared with 3 simple steps. Sign up for Alert Marin to receive evacuation warnings. Know where to go. Pack a go bag and have it ready. Adapting to wildfire means being prepared. Learn more at firesafemarin.org.
So there's a 30-second, and then I'll give the 15-second version, but I'll give it in Spanish.
Cuando es tiempo para evacuar, sabes qué hacer y por estar en movimiento rápido. Prepárese con estas medidas sencillas. Regístrese con Alert Marin, sepa dónde ir y mantenga su mochila de emergencia lista.
And then the last one, these go fast, but believe it or not, these are used a lot. Here's the 6-second.
Are you prepared for wildfire? Learn what to do at firesafemarin.org.
So that's just gives you a little sense of the process that we have to go through when we're doing these things. And you'll start seeing this in a lot of different mediums. We've made the ad buys and whatnot. There's variations of this that'll be in the IJ that are a bit different. There's static ads with that and so forth. And then you'll see a lot of it on Instagram and Facebook and Twitter and all that stuff that I don't really follow as closely as most of the rest of the world does. With that, glad to answer any questions.
Thanks, Rich. Questions, please. I see Steve Berto has his hands up.
Not a question, just a lot of high praise for Rich and everything they do. As a communications professional, those videos are spot on. And frankly, everything you guys do at FireSafe is just pitch perfect and well done. So really just another job well done, Rich.
Thank you, much appreciated. It is a team effort. So I'm really very lucky with the people I work with to make all this possible.
Yep. Thanks, Steve. Yeah, Mark, go ahead.
Rich, could you bring up the evacuation live session that we're going to do on the 26th?
The video for that one?
Or just mention what we're doing.
Oh, just mention, yeah. Oh, so this whole campaign is divided in sort of big topics. And right now, wildfire preparedness is the main topic. And as always, evacuation is what people are most interested in. On September 25th at 6 p.m. on Marin Community TV, it'll also be available on Zoom. We're going to have a discussion of evacuation with Mark's going to be there. Chief Navarro from Mill Valley and Chief Weber are going to be there, and I'll be the host on there. And it's really beyond go bags evacuation. So it's going to get into a lot of the nuance that people ask for. You're going to hear kind of a whole different spin on the thing, a lot of focus on just how, in fact, public safety government is prepared and all the things that they're doing. And then, of course, what are the things that individuals need to do? And again, it's not packing a go bag. That's nice. That's important, but that's a very small thing. Planning and so many other things are much important. So you're going to hear evacuation discussed on a different level. Just a great team coming to talk about it.
And September 26th rather than
20th. Oh, 26th. And of course, it's streaming. So we expect most of the viewers, it'll be available to everybody, pushed out to all of you. You can put it in newsletters and whatnot, because we think there'll be a lot of interest after it's over to view it.
Thanks, Mark and Rich. Any other questions? directors. Any public comment on this item, this one committee report item?
If there are any members of the public wishing to speak on the current item, please raise your hand in the reactions and press *9 to raise your hand if you're joining us by phone. And we do not have any public comments, sir.
Thank you. So bringing it back to the board for any further thoughts.
I have a thought.
Julie?
Mark, are you going to circulate the Zoom link for that evacuation thing on the 26th to the board members?
Yeah, our board members, committees, member agencies, we're going to ask them to help amplify that message.
Great, thank you.
It did just go out in our newsletter too. That's 12,000 subscribers to that. So we're the Firewise leaders. We're definitely pushing it, and we'll make it available to each agency distributor on their own on top of everything else.
All right, terrific. So now we're ready to move on to item 8, informational items. We have 5 different items: acknowledgement of the Citizens Oversight Committee minutes, acknowledgement of the Executive Committee minutes of September 11th, the UCCE Marin and UC Master Gardener Program annual report, and a Vice President listening session. So if everyone's okay, we'll jump right to 9C, which is the Vice President's listening session, and Julie McMillan.
Yeah, 9D. As I said in my application to be vice president, I wanted to meet with each board member individually to listen to basically how things are going for you on the board. And Martina is going to work with me to schedule each of you for a listening session. I'm hoping that it will be convenient for you to come to the new office at the Commons and meet with me only for half an hour. You're welcome to bring candy or chips or whatever you think that I would like. That would be appreciated. If it's not convenient for you to come up to the office, we can do a Zoom call, but that's not my preference. I would really like to have a face-to-face meeting with you. The dates that I'm thinking about doing this are October 3rd, 5th, 11th, and 17th. And my goal is to have all of this done by October 25th. Thank you.
So any questions of Julie or about A, B, or C, any of the minutes, or do you see extension item? All right, looks like we don't have any. So let's see if the public has any comments on any of those items.
If there are any members of the public wishing to speak on any of the informational items, please raise your hand in the reactions or press *9 to raise your hand if you're joining by phone. Those joining by phone may then press *6 to unmute themselves. And sir, we do not have any public comments.
Thank you. Back to the board for any further discussion on any of the informational items, A through C, A through C. We have a double C. That's a good one. It's a CC. Just noting that we have A, B, C, C in the informational items. And we're going to 9D now, which is update on ingress and egress risk assessment.
President Rodoni, I just have a quick question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, I've had my hand up. I was just wanting to ask Julie if she'd be amenable to something other than meeting at the new office. It's kind of a schlep up there and we're close by. So I'm hoping there'll be options to meet face to face at a less formal location if that's possible. Thank you.
That is possible, but I'm really also kind of using these meetings as an excuse to get everyone up to the new facility. So, you know, we can make arrangements for face-to-face meetings in other locations, Barbara. But I think it's really important for people to see the new facilities to the extent possible.
All right. Anything else before we move to the presentation 9D? Okay, this is the presentation from Tammy Levizio, who from Sonoma Technology.
Hi, everyone. I'm going to share my screen Mark or Charlotte, did you want to say anything before I get going, or just hop right in?
I think you should just hop right in.
All right, so it's first off, thank you for having me. It's nice to see some familiar faces. It's been a while since I've been at a board meeting, but I wanted to just give a really quick project update on the ingress egress planning tool project. I guess I will first start off by saying I'm really, really pleased with the progress that our project team has been making. We've accomplished a lot of work in a short period of time, so that's exciting. And today, what I want to do is just give a broad sort of project update and then talk about some of the key findings from the literature and the data review tasks that we've recently completed. And then talk about next steps and take any questions or discussion items. So just as a reminder, this project is really geared toward doing an assessment of evacuation route vulnerability and looking at relative risk, on certain roadways and evacuation routes throughout the county, and to try and understand what are the factors that are really contributing to risk on those roadways, and then using that information for mitigation project planning. Just as a reminder, this is not, we're not trying to figure out ways to, in a real-time situation, try to manage an evacuation. That's not what the project is about. It's looking at how can we make our road network and our infrastructure and messaging and communications really robust around evacuation, and what mitigation projects can we implement to try and make evacuations go smoothly. So just as another reminder, trying to move my video so I can see my screen. Just as another reminder, so we started the project in late April, and we spent much of May planning and getting organized, and part of that process involved establishing a technical advisory team to help guide and provide input to the work that we're doing, and also to review work products to make sure that they're useful and meaningful and action-oriented. And so, much of May was spent doing that. And then as we moved into June, we really started focusing on performing a literature review. And the reason that we wanted to do that was to really understand the current state of the science in evacuation dynamics. And we had certain questions that we were trying to answer with that literature review, and I'll get to those in just a second. But we spent most of June and July completing the literature review and the data review. And the actual literature review report will be coming out very soon. We're just making some final edits to it, and that will be released very shortly. And there's a lot of really interesting and rich information in that report. And since we finished the literature review, we've moved into really starting to perform some of the modeling. And so just as a reminder, when I talk about modeling, what we're going to be doing is combining fire modeling, communications modeling, and traffic modeling to look at what would actually happen during certain evacuation events. And so we're looking at different fire scenarios under different weather conditions, looking at how people receive their information, how long it takes them to mobilize and get onto the road network. And then once they enter the road network, what does that look like from a transportation traffic perspective? And again, I just want to reiterate the value of the technical advisory team. So we've recruited many members from the agencies that are listed on the slide, and I'll distribute these slides after the presentation here, but I cannot emphasize the value of this team. They've provided really, really good input, really good insights, and it's really helpful for our project team to understand what the concerns are from different agency perspectives. We had a technical advisory team meeting yesterday, And we just had a really rich and really valuable discussion. So they've been really helpful through the process. Sorry, something's weird's going on with my screen. Okay, so when we started out with the literature review, we really wanted to understand what have been the leading causes of civilian fatalities during wildfire evacuations, and really getting into the specifics of what are the conditions that and circumstances that lead to civilian fatalities, because obviously you want to avoid those. And then what risk factors contributed to the deaths. And then taking all of the information that we learned from the literature review, we wanted to translate that to Marin and look at what are the practical implications for the modeling that we're going to be doing in Marin County. So as part of the literature review, we reviewed more than 70 articles, reports, documents, policy briefs, district attorney reports, both for the United States and other countries. And it's interesting that there's not that much. There's not as much as I would have thought in in the public literature about evacuation and fatalities, but the United States and Australia seem to have probably the most documentation, and so we sort of focused on those two. But we did, look at reports from other countries. It took a lot of effort and brain power to organize and summarize some of the key findings. And, once we reviewed all the data, we tried to organize the information into, what are wildfire evacuation goals? What does a successful evacuation look like? And that can be different from a fire agency perspective versus the public perspective. And we talk about that in the report that's coming out. And we also looked at wildfire evacuation risk factors. And the reason that we wanted to really focus on these is because we're building models that take into account all of the different risk factors that should be considered when you're trying to model an evacuation scenario. And we used a lot of the information that came out of the literature review to actually start to develop our models, which is what we're working on now. And I just wanted to highlight a couple of the interesting findings from the literature review. So, sorry, that one of the big questions that we were wanting to answer is, what are the leading causes of injuries and fatalities during wildfire evacuation? I think there's a public misconception that people tend to die when they're in their vehicles on roadways that are unobstructed. And what we found is that that's just not the case. That's not what the data says. So this is just a slide showing some data from the Camp Fire. And what you look at, what we see here is of 85 confirmed fatalities that occurred, most of those occurred in people's homes or on their properties. And that tends to be a result of them either deciding not to evacuate or leaving when it's too late. There were a couple of fatalities that occurred in automobiles, but that was a very specific circumstance where there was a traffic accident and the roadway became blocked. And so I think Mark can probably talk a little bit more about this from a policy perspective, but I think one thing that we wanted to look at is we wanted to sort of look at the data and see what it says around the circumstances when people actually die during evacuations. And it's generally not when they're in their automobile on an unobstructed roadway. The other thing that we looked at is trying to come up with a definition of evacuation success. So there isn't one definition that is generally accepted. And so we compiled all of the data that we had, and we came up with these 5 determinants: fire behavior, evacuation alerts and communications, evacuation decision-making, and then where do residents travel during an evacuation? Are they going to pick up their kids and then going home and then going somewhere else? And so looking at sort of what are the dynamics that drive people's decision-making during evacuations? And then how long does it take for them to arrive at a safe destination? And again, in the context of mitigation, you know, what a couple of the big takeaways were, you know, there are actions that can be taken prior to a fire event. The more work that can be done in advance to educate the public, prepare the roadway and landscape infrastructure to support evacuations, the better the public response will be during the event. And then actions that can be taken during a fire event. So, you know, should you allocate more personnel to help manage traffic during the event and improve communication? And one of the things that was interesting is a lot of the literature and the survey data showed that repeated, consistent messaging from reliable and trusted sources is key. And there's a lot of information that you'll see when you read the report coming out that can really help, I think, inform some of the outreach programs and messaging around evacuation preparedness. And, you know, as somebody said earlier, it's not just pack your go bag, right? And again, we looked at, we basically took an inventory of all of the different evacuation risk factors, and we're incorporating these into the modeling that we're currently working on. And so I don't want to spend too much time on this, but our next steps are really to use the information, you know, from the literature and data review to start to begin to develop our modeling approach. And we're already doing that. We've started to configure our models for 5 test areas. And the idea is that we've selected 5 test areas that are somewhat unique relative to each other. And we're building our models for these areas to test the concept and to validate the models and make sure that they're, you know, performing as we would expect. We've started with Fairfax, and we've actually done quite a bit of work looking at modeling different types of evacuation scenarios for different fire conditions or weather conditions, different times of the day, and taking into account times when parents might be picking up their kids after school and there might be rush hour conditions, as well as a nighttime event where you might have a fire that occurs during the night. And that would be a very different traffic scenario than a rush hour situation, as well as accounting for tourist populations during the weekends. And so we're looking at a variety of evacuation situations. And we're expecting to have some preliminary results to share from the modeling by November. And that's my quick update. So Mark and Charlotte, what did I miss?
Great job, Tammy. Thank you.
Mark, anything to add?
You know, one thing I do want to add, and that is before we even start really getting our hands dirty and designing our projects based on the data that we're going to get from this report, we are going to be working with Fire Safe Marin and our communication specialists for creating simple messaging packets for the MWPA, Fire Safe Marin, and all of our member agencies about the evacuation aspect of it. Stay in your cars, stay on paved roads. That's where you're going to live. So, and we've been saying this for years with only experiential data from firefighters to support it. Now we have this robust data set to support that messaging.
Thanks, Mark. Going to questions for directors now. I see Catherine Hilliard has her hand up. Can you
Thank you
close
so
the
much.
screen, please?
Yeah, sorry.
You could shift the screen back to. Thank you. Thanks a lot. Catherine?
So I have three parts to the question. One is, thank you for all that information. I'm a little bit, I want to hear, who is the end user? Is it going to be all of us 17 members? Is it going to be the public? Is it going to be the operations people? Is it going to be the technical advisory or advisory technical committee? Who will be, is this simple enough for me? That's part one. Part two is we have something called Zone Haven. Zone Haven is supposed to tell us how to evacuate. How does this program relate to Zone Haven? I guess I only had two parts to my question.
I'll take this, Tammy.
Okay.
So the audience for this study is our member agencies, our fire departments, the MWPA, public works agencies, law enforcement agencies, community development agencies, community planners. And however, we will be able to express this in a way for the board to look at the prioritization of our efforts at a strategy level. Then for our operations committee, they're going to drop down a little bit more. And then it's our advisory technical committee. And then our partners at Public Works will be able to use this data. That our traffic engineers will be able to look at their road networks. Our law enforcement personnel will be able to look at the pinch points, the locations where they should change their traffic control strategies. So that's really the intended audience. It's not intended for the public to digest. That's question number one. Question number two, Zone Haven is actually an unpaid partner in this research topic. And the data and the traffic modeling that is being done in our risk assessment is being loaded into Zone Haven. So as our public safety officials manage an evacuation through the Zone Haven emergency management platform, that data will help inform their decisions.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bruce?
Yeah, let's see, Tammy, thank you for a fantastic briefing, and Charlotte for all the work you've done in the background. My question is going into the fire modeling, and Mark, you mentioned that we've been, we go on kind of what we know, been going on what we know, and now we have a lot of data. But specifically, Tammy, what scenarios will you be running to assess risks during evacuation? And I just can say that I'm familiar with the modeling. I'm familiar with Monte Carlo simulation, looking back at look at our weather stations, look at historic weather, look at historic ignitions, look at the footprints that have come over, and we can look at all this historic data, and we run the Monte Carlo simulation, and we get kind of this. It's kind of like this. You get these guesstimations of where the the really hazardous areas are, where the not so hazardous areas are, but they don't capture things like the Mark's described weather events, a Pacific weather pattern coming in, or a November northeastern system which fueled the Tubbs fire. Can you just please describe how you're going to go about picking your wildfire simulation scenarios and the logic behind that?
Sure, my favorite topic. So actually, we're developing baseline modeling scenarios, which will be sort of bounding scenarios, right? So we're looking at 3 different weather scenarios. One is a northeast Diablo wind event. The second is just sort of an average summer day event, where you don't necessarily have high winds from the northeast, but it's warm, low humidity. And then the third event is actually one that Mark suggested, which is quite interesting, which is called a warm sea breeze event, which is where you have offshore winds that blow out to the ocean, but they don't stay above the ocean long enough to pick up moisture, and then they reverse and come back onshore. And so we're modeling to start with those 3 weather scenarios. And of course, we look to the local weather stations to get fuel moisture, conditions. And the modeling that we're doing is really, we're looking at an ignition point and then how a fire would spread from that specific point, which is a little bit different than the modeling that was done, for example, in the CWPP, where we're just sort of looking at general hazard over the landscape. This is actually, we're doing fire growth modeling. And hopefully in my next update to the board, I can show, some of the results with maps and things that will hopefully make it a little bit more clear. But as we look at the different communities, this is the great thing about having experts on the team who understand, where fire might ignite and propagate. Is we look at the landscape, we look at the community, and we say, okay, we have ignition history, of course, but there are places where maybe there has not been an ignition that are of concern. And so we're trying to balance that with ignition history, fire history, and everything else. And so we're taking a kind of an eye in the sky view, but applying some, real logic to it when it comes to where would we be concerned if a fire were to occur and we had to evacuate.
Oh, okay, that's great. That's fantastic. I like the scenario because Monte Carlo simulation is just kind of an average,
Random. It's sort of random.
Roll the dice a million times, and what are you going to come up with? You're going to come up with the same, it'll be evenly spread. But so then one question, the reality is that these the statistical the likelihood of these scenarios actually occurring, will you be providing an articulation of the X in 100th, or I mean just to help us, not to terrify everybody, that this fire is going to blast across the landscape and burn 500,000 acres and be devastating? Will you be talking about the statistical aspects of those scenarios that you're modeling? And
yeah, I mean, we certainly can, but what we're trying to do is model scenarios where that would cause a problem during an evacuation, right? I mean, so if a fire were to ignite in certain parts of the county, it might not pose a huge evacuation threat. So what we're really trying to look at with the modeling is what scenarios would really, impact the system if a fire were to occur in those areas.
thank you. And Charlotte, I saw her raising her hand, but thank you so much. I'm thrilled. I'm so excited about this project. So excited. Thank you so much.
Charlotte, did you have a comment you wanted to make? Or?
No, I agree with
Okay.
Tammy's comment.
Thank you. Director Burke.
Thank you for this. It's really, really helpful. Will the end product be applicable to another municipality like Mill Valley, or will we have to start from the ground up to make the analysis?
So this is a JPA wide project. We're running this assessment over the entire MWPA jurisdiction. So all of Marin County except Tiburon and Belvedere, which of course we have to account for when people evacuate onto 101.
Those communities that were listed, Director Burke, were just our beta testing to validate the model. Then we'll apply it to the entire jurisdiction.
Yeah,
understood. Second question, can I invite you to make a presentation to our Emergency Preparedness Commission this fall?
Me?
Or
Sure.
Charlotte?
Sure.
Okay, I'd love to follow up. Thank you.
Thanks, Director. Anyone else with questions? Julie?
Yeah, thank you, Tammy. That's so interesting. I'm just wondering, given how the fires in the last maybe 5 to 7 years have exploded, I'm wondering if your literature search was focused on more recent fires or if it covered a more broad time period.
Yeah, good question. It was focused on more recent fires, but we did, look back in time. I think, as everybody knows, one of the biggest concerns are these huge wind-driven fires, and that's when people tend to, that's when evacuation becomes really challenging. When you don't have a lot of notification, systems go down, the fire is outpacing evacuation plans. And you'll see that that's documented in the report.
Thank you. Any other questions? Let's move to the public for any public comment on this item.
If there are any members of the public wishing to speak on the current item of the agenda, please raise your hand in the reactions. And please press *9 to raise your hand if you are joining us by phone. You may then press *6 to unmute yourself. And sir, we do not have any public comments at this time.
Thank you, Martina. Go back to the board for any further discussion on this item. And thank you, Tammy, for your presentation. Look forward to seeing you again soon. Julie, do you want to make a comment?
Yeah, my comment is I think all member agencies would benefit from a presentation about all this information once it's all finalized. And it can be consistent from jurisdiction to jurisdiction, and then uniquely tailored to the individual recipient of the information. I think that would be a really good goal to try to shoot for once the study's complete.
Charlotte, you want to?
Yes, so Tammy mentioned the technical advisory committee that includes representatives of all the member agencies and our partner agencies, such as the Transportation Authority, Public Works, and cities. But we also are sending monthly updates about this project to the leadership of all our member agencies. And we can definitely work towards presenting when we have initial and final results.
Thank you, Charlotte. So we're going to move on to next item, which is item 10, board member requests for future agenda items. Anyone have any requests for future items? Bruce? You're muted, Bruce. There you go.
Yes, I think you all know that there's been a team working for a couple of years, the Marin Biomass Collaborative here in the county. They are, the project is looking to basically assess between our wildfire prevention work that we're doing and all the green waste management. We're moving hundreds of thousands of tons of biomass. We're running them through current channels right now, which is taken to the dumps and they do what they want and other stuff gets burned, whatever. Anyway, I would suggest this group, I've been representing MWP on it, has received a $500,000 grant from the governor's office. We're one of 5 projects here in the state of California, looking at biomass utilization pathways. We're also looking at greenhouse gas implications. We signed a contract. Marin RCD is the fiscal agent. And this week their board approved a consultant to come in and do the consultant work to help us figure out what we have, where it's going, what it could be processed into, biochar, biomass, compost, pellets, you name it. Anyway, I would suggest that it's time for us to have this be an agenda item for the full board to get a full presentation on the project, the status, the expectations, and as all of you members are going to be being asked some questions about what are your plans, and it'll be all well facilitated. But I would suggest that we allocate time for a thorough presentation and an interactive session. And then just to prepare you that there's going to be an article in the IGA this week, and so I want you to know that it's coming before it comes, and who knows what it's going to say. I was interviewed. I was actually interviewed for 20 minutes on this thing. So, but I'd like to have that be an agenda, Dennis, please.
Sounds good, Bruce. Thank you. Stephen, did you have your hand up?
I was just going to heartily second that. I think it's very timely and useful. I'm eager to hear about it. So let's do it.
Terrific. Thank you both. Any other items for future agendas? Okay, if not, we're going to move to item 11 now, which is a closed session. And as indicated on the agenda, the board will conduct a conference related to the anticipated litigation pursuant to the Government Code 54356.9 D4. one case. And before we do that, we want to have to open time for public expression on the closed session item. So Martina, do you want to see if there's any public comment on the closed session item?
If there are any members of the public wishing to speak on the closed session item only, please raise your hand in the reaction. Please press *9 to raise your hand if you're joining us by phone, to which you will then press *9 to unmute yourself when called upon. And we do not have any public comments, sir.
All right, thank you. So we're going to move into closed session. You should have received that Zoom link in a previous email. So we'll see you there in a couple minutes. And will anyone need something from Martina at this point? Okay, thank you. We'll see you at the closed session. It looks like we have a quorum. We're coming back from closed session. And our attorney, our legal counsel, Megan Azevedo, has an announcement today.
Thank you, President Rodoni. So in compliance with Government Code 54957.1A2, the board voted in closed session to authorize outside counsel Sabrina Teller to file an amicus brief on behalf of MWPA and potentially partner agencies in support of the UC Regents in a CEQA suit filed in the California First District Court of Appeals, Claremont Canyon Conservancy versus UC Regents. That vote, for the record, was a no from Catherine Donahue, 2 abstentions from Steve Burdo, and who was the other, Mark?
Absences.
Absences, sorry, absences.
Absences from Jeske, Burdo, and Burke.
Thank you for the clarification, and all others in favor.
All right, thank you all. That concludes our meeting today. So we'll see you all October 20th.
Thank you.
Thank you.